say your child was out, he was using, do you hope that there is a safe supply made available for them?
Absolutely, I would.
Saskatoon Police Chief McBride joined me on the podcast to talk about everything from BC's attempt at decriminalization.
It did not seem to me that the adequate supports were in place.
His opinions on Alberta's compassionate intervention or forced treatment initiatives.
I'm not a wholesale no. It's not a concept that I completely disagree with.
How he feels the current justice and carceral systems are falling short for people who use substances.
They come out and they go straight back to their same neighborhood, their same friends, their same community, and we leave them to fend for themselves. We give them an opportunity and set them up to fail.
And a lot more, including his thoughts on the provision of safe using supplies in Saskatchewan, homelessness encampments, Saskatoon's new complex needs shelter, our overcrowded prisons, and even the challenges around the new bathrooms that the Saskatoon core neighborhood is getting. It's a lot more complicated than you might think. But before we get into it, what's up? My name's Dan, podcaster, keynote speaker, and advocate, and this is Hard Knocks Talks, your addictions podcast. We want to hear your thoughts. If at any time during this episode something resonates with you or rubs you the wrong way, leave us a comment. We want to hear about it. We're all about fostering productive conversations about substance use, and we can't do it alone. So with that, let's get into my conversation about the challenges and solutions around substance use in Saskatoon with Police Chief McBride.
This is Hard Knocks Talks.
What's up, Cam? How are you?
I'm great. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming today.
Yeah, my pleasure to be here for sure.
Is there anything that you'd like to say before we jump in?
You know, I'm just very happy to be here. The conversations that I anticipate we'll have are conversations that are happening in the community and that are of great interest to people. And so I love to be part of a good conversation.
Yeah.
And so I'm, very grateful to be here.
Well, you're in good company, I assure you.
Right on.
Okay, so with BC stepping away from decriminalization, what's your stance on their approach to decrim and how quickly they step back from it? Like, do you think they gave it a fair shot? Do you think they executed properly?
The policing community in Saskatchewan and even extending out into Canada as a whole, we believe in harm reduction and we believe in decriminalization where it is accompanied by adequate supports, wraparound supports and services and structures that ensure that decriminalization process is successful and effective. And so looking at the BC experience from 2 provinces away, it did not seem to me that the adequate supports were in place that would allow or ensure that their decriminalization process would be successful. And certainly they have a significant circumstance there that they're working with. And so it would have taken a very significant undertaking to make sure that they were prepared for what was going to happen.
Yeah. You know, they talk about the Portugal model, and maybe BC was trying to emulate that. And when we look at Portugal, we see that they are very much different than what anyone in Canada seems to be doing right now.
One of our struggles here in Saskatchewan in particular is that when you look at the Portugal model and what might be an ideal model, we think about the initial interaction with an individual, that intervention or that first contact, and that's police often, and that's a municipal responsibility. We look at the prosecution side that might result in somebody being diverted to alternative measures or to the services that are available, and that's federal. And then we look at who pays for those services within the health or mental health and addictions side of things, and that's provincial. And so when we look at what it might take in order to streamline a process that would be very effective, it's a significant undertaking here. I imagine it would have been similar in British Columbia, and that coordination comes with a lot of work, a lot of preparation.
With the federal conversation, with Pierre Poilievre saying things like, we're going to get rid of, and I'm paraphrasing, get rid of safe consumption sites and take measures to reduce harm reduction strategies or availability in Canada. What do you think the future looks like for harm reduction, like for the safe consumption site of prairie harm reduction, or like the availability of safe using supplies?
Mm-hmm. I think there's two stories being told. And recently, over the last few years, we've focused on the individual who might be using drugs.
Mm-hmm.
We know that many of these individuals have had traumatic life experiences. We know they might be suffering or experiencing from homelessness, uh, various traumas, and so our focus has been very individual centered, and that's a great thing. We've recognized that addictions is a health issue, and so we don't want to criminalize
Mm-hmm.
people who are in that space. But the other story is the community and what the community is experiencing as a result of the outward manifestation or behaviors that are exhibited by somebody who's in the public and high.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the pendulum is swinging in terms of what emphasis is being placed on which story
Mm-hmm.
and who's being listened to. Certainly, I, as the chief of Saskatoon Police, am hearing a lot about community concerns right now, and questioning whether or not we've leaned too far to one side and neglected the other side of the story.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think looking forward, certainly my position is we need balance. We need to look at community safety through various lenses and ensure that we're working with individuals in crisis who are in significant need
Mm-hmm.
while maintaining the balance of community safety. And that then results in trying to figure out the best balance between enforcement,
Mm-hmm.
community engagement,
Mm-hmm.
harm reduction, and that is a big topic.
Mm-hmm. It certainly is.
Yeah.
And I think one of the points that was really brought forward in British Columbia's strategy was how there was an uptick in public use. And then I hear some organizations advocating that, well, if they're using in public, they're more likely to be found when they're overdosing. Now, that's the one story that you, of the two that you mentioned. Now, the
Yeah.
other story to that is that when I'm going for ice cream on Sunday morning with my family, and I come across someone who is overdosing, and if I Narcan them, and that's good, and they're safe now, but when someone wakes up from being Narcaned, typically they're not in good shape.
Yeah.
They're typically not happy. They go into withdrawal very quickly.
Right.
And not everybody is trained to do that. So to be leaning on the public to provide a public health service without the proper training, the reason I'm saying all of this is that I understand the two stories that you're telling.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that those are two very interesting lenses to look at this problem through.
Yeah.
So last year, Chief Cooper was on the show. He expressed his opinions around coerced treatment and thought that it was not necessarily an effective means to healing our communities. Do you agree?
That's a topic I've been wrestling with a lot. I've been looking at the compassionate intervention legislation that's proposed in Alberta and what that might mean for Saskatchewan. I always go back to a story. When I first started policing, my first posting after training was our downtown. And at that time, we had several individuals who were frequenting downtown who were intoxicated every single day.
Mm-hmm.
And our methodology at that time for working with individuals in that state were if they were intoxicated to the point where they couldn't care for themselves, we would arrest them. We would bring them to detention, and they would remain there until they were sober, and we would issue a summons, a ticket, for being intoxicated in a public place, knowing full well they had no means with which to pay that ticket.
Yeah.
But the tickets would accumulate, and eventually a warrant would be issued because they wouldn't be paid, and the individual would be faced with a large fine or a period of incarceration.
Mm-hmm.
And so quite often they would all of a sudden they disappear from downtown for 30, 60, 90 days. And the fascinating thing for me was my interactions with them were typically bad. They were intoxicated, difficult to deal with. And when they would come out, they were of sound mind. They were sober. And I could have a conversation with them. And I saw a side of them that I didn't get to see otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to hear their stories, and I got to know a little bit about who they are as an individual. And I loved that. And so when I think about compassionate intervention legislation, that would be a forced or a coerced period where they have to receive treatment. I understand their rights as an individual to choose, and I understand all the intricacies of what that might look like. But I also see some benefit based on my own personal experience of what the potential might be of offering somebody an opportunity to make a clear and informed decision for their life. And that really excites me. And so that's what I'm wrestling with as I'm trying to figure out, you know, what my position is on that issue.
Yeah. Well, and personally for me, and sometimes people are surprised to hear me say this, I've heard too many stories of jailhouse genesis. I've had too many people sit in that chair and tell me jail saved my life, you know, to believe that there is no place for coercion on our spectrum of care. Like I have to say that it does have a place. What concerns me is who's deciding.
Yeah.
You know
Oh,
what I mean?
absolutely.
Yeah.
And so for me, I also think about my own children. And if one of my children was in a place where they had hit the bottom,
Yeah.
and there was, you know, at face value anyways, there was just no hope for them.
Mm-hmm.
As a parent who cares and who loves, I would want to do whatever it took to get them through to the other side. And if I knew that that was placing them in a facility where they were stuck and they couldn't get out and they had to work through it in a supported, caring environment, I'd be all in. And so, again, when we look at the issue, or when we look at the possibilities, it would have to include that client-centered care and you know, it would have to be culturally appropriate, spiritually appropriate, and just a real wraparound circumstance where that individual was not simply removed from society. They would be given every opportunity at a new life coming out the other side.
So client-centered as opposed to client-driven.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So there are some organizations that do focus on client-driven care. Now, again, I believe there is a place for that on our spectrum of care. Sometimes people just need, hey, this is what I need. Can you help me get it?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
You know,
Yeah.
How many of those people did you witness just go right back into their old lifestyle?
Quite a few.
Yeah.
You know, I would maybe be bold enough to say most did. But I can also say that some I still see on the streets of Saskatoon who have managed to, you know, survive that period in their life, and they're productive and they're contributing to their community and they are sober, and I can walk up to them and have a conversation.
What do you think was missing maybe then and probably now that kept the recidivism going, that kept that loop back into addiction going?
You know, I think one of the biggest issues is that we provide individuals with treatment or with options. You know, a person who might be incarcerated for a period of time and comes out, they come out and they go straight back to their same neighborhood, their same friends, their same community. It is what they know, and we leave them to fend for themselves with good luck. And that is a significant problem. We give them an opportunity and set them up to fail. And that, you know, that really bothers me a lot. So many times I've had conversations with those who have been successful, and they'll say it was their reconnection to family, or it was their reconnection to their spirituality or their culture that made all the difference to them.
to build on what you just said there, your children, if you felt that they needed that, it would be wonderful if it was available. How does your thought process around safe supply go when we think about our children? Like, say your child was out, she was using, I'm not sure. And they were going to use no matter what, like we're going to use.
Yeah.
Would you hope that there is a safe supply made available for them?
Absolutely, I would.
Yeah.
And certainly we've seen through the number of overdoses in the community that, the toxicity of what's out there is very high in many cases. And so, yeah, I mean, within the realm of harm reduction, ensuring those individuals are around long enough to make a choice. And that's the ultimate goal, is to keep them alive and healthy in as much as we can, so that when the day comes that they're ready for change, they have that opportunity.
Yeah. And I suppose you would say the same for our clean supplies that were taken from us.
Yeah, I was just having a conversation with a community member. They were talking about the decrease of needles in the community and how wonderful that is. And yes, it's wonderful, but it also translates to the fact that people are reusing and sharing needles. And so while we're seeing perhaps cleanliness or an elevated cleanliness in the community, we can anticipate also seeing an elevation in blood-borne disease. And that's a bad news story. And so, and again, it's balance. It's looking at the whole story, not just through one lens or through at one side of the story.
Yeah. Maybe on the other side of this, with the overcrowding in the carceral system here in Saskatchewan, especially highlighted by EFRI in the news lately, and with the vast majority of those incarcerated due to poverty-related or addiction-related crimes, what measures do you think could be taken to keep poverty and addiction-related offenders out of prison?
I am very proud of our progressive stance when it comes to alternative measures within the Saskatoon Police Service. That was I would say one of Troy Cooper's legacies that he left behind, was a real motivation to advance our work within the area of alternative measures. I think for decades we've relied on a fine system where we punish people, or we try to bring correction through the use of fines. And when you're working with individuals who are in poverty, who are homeless, who don't have the means, a fine is completely irrelevant to them. They know they've received a piece of paper with an obligation they can't possibly meet. And so how do we work through that? How do we navigate that in a different way to restore them as an individual, but to restore them in their community as well? And so we're working on those things. We actually are working closely with the Saskatoon Tribal Council, who is also a leader in the area of alternative measures. And we're really making good headway. I'm proud of that.
I was looking into your new community policing policy.
Okay.
A little bit. And it mentioned that you're trying to shift to a more community-based lens, not unlike what you just mentioned. Can you shed a little bit of light on maybe the organizations that you're planning on working with closest, besides STC, to maybe reduce the crowding in our carceral system?
We've got so many organizations that we are working to invest in that, it's hard for me to single out one or two. But I think within that realm, information sharing is where I go to. We've got a very small, when you look at the population of Saskatoon, we've got a very small percentage of the population that are frequently in contact with the police or with the justice system. I think of the possibilities if we could share information, and if we could look at an individual from every angle and figure out what their needs are in the moment, stop duplicating services, stop providing services that are conflicting with one another, and develop a strategy that really speaks to that specific individual. And if we could do that more effectively, as organizations, including our community-based organizations in Saskatoon that are very immersed and committed to the work that they're doing.
I would say especially our community-based organizations.
Yeah. And imagine what we could do if we could share information freely and effectively in a way that would provide the absolute best opportunity for a positive outcome for an individual. Like that really gets me excited.
My friend, Colleen Christopherson Cote, do you know her?
I sure do.
Yeah. I consulted with her before this show, by the way. It was her that brought the community policing policy forward to me.
Okay.
So, she said something to the effect some time ago. She's like, we don't need to do what everyone's doing. We need to know what everyone is doing. Yeah,
absolutely.
Right? Yeah,
absolutely. And communication.
Exactly. And allowing and supporting PHR to do what they're good at, and allowing SHIP and supporting them in doing what they're good at. You know, I know from my own personal experience, I'm not good at everything. And when I suck at something, I find someone who's good at it. Right. and that's how you build an effective team. Yeah. So I really resonate with what you just said there. How, and maybe give us an example of how you can use your community partnerships with STC, with Prairie Harm, with whoever. How can those in a tactile way be used to keep someone out of prison for poverty or addiction related offenses?
Yeah, got it.
Okay.
So wouldn't it be amazing if when the police interact with somebody, we can identify where they're from, who their supports are, which organizations they've already had interactions with, who their counselor might be, who their addictions worker might be, and then also looking at what's appropriate for that individual in terms of a downstream preventative plan for them. And in many cases, we don't do that. And we're seeing that so much now with our with the pace of the work that has changed in the last 2 years significantly. And we're struggling to have the time that it takes to deal with these complex circumstances with individuals. And so when we think about community policing, it's how do we work with community in a broader sense to provide what an individual needs in a way that will keep them out of the justice system or keep them out of an incarceration period, yet keeping the community safe and bringing restitution.
Yeah. Well, in my own personal experience, it was that aftercare. I stayed in a sober living house. Trache House, run by Comfy. I stayed there for a year. I got my son back from the ministry. I got my feet under me, and here we are today.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I think it's safe to say that perhaps your opinions on coercion are a little bit different than Chief Cooper's.
I'm not a wholesale no. It's not a concept that I completely disagree with, but I look at it cautiously, knowing that it would have to be done well. And there would have to be a very, very specific criteria for who would be a candidate for that. And it would have to be well informed. And then we'd have to be very carefully looking at outcomes and measuring success in the end. And it has to be person focused, for sure.
Tell us about the new shelter on Idlewild Drive, where the old liquor store used to be. It's a complex needs shelter.
Yeah.
Do you think that this is an effective strategy in assisting our more vulnerable in finding a pathway to wellness?
So within the current model that's been proposed, it's a 24-hour hold on that individual. And so it's the benefits are it's an extra or additional opportunity to keep people out of detention.
So did we just move the drunk tank down the road or what?
Well, no.
Okay.
And yes. And I'll expand on that.
Yeah.
So right now within our detention center, if we bring somebody in, they're locked in a cell and they're given an assessment by a paramedic.
Mm-hmm.
Their well-being is determined. They're provided, the bare necessities in order to get by until they're sober,
Mm-hmm.
and then they're released. And quite commonly, that's about an 8-hour period.
Really? That's it?
That's it. And that's based on the speed at which your body can metabolize the alcohol. And so we do an assessment if they're sober enough to care for themselves, and that's kind of the big thing.
Mm-hmm.
Can they care for themselves? And if yes, they're released. And they're released to nothing. They're released to the street.
Yeah.
To fend for themselves. And that, for me, has always been a problem. I described it to several people. I actually supervised our detention center for 18 months.
Oh, wow.
And I described it this way. Wouldn't it be amazing if we had somebody with a catcher's mitt at the door to detention to catch these individuals as they're coming out and to find out what they need,
Yeah.
where they might need to go, who their supports are, all those kind of things that we just weren't doing. And that's the benefit of the shelter on Idlewild. Yes, there will be individuals who are, intoxicated, incapable of caring for themselves, experiencing many needs within their life. But they're going to hold them for longer.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to have trained staff who have the ability and capacity to engage with them, to find out, those pertinent questions of where are you going? How can we help you? What are your immediate needs? Do you need a ride to social services? Do you need whatever? And, so I think it is a stopgap. It's something that we haven't had that will fit a need. Is it going to fix a significant social problem or,
Mm-hmm.
be a real significant, impactful opportunity for someone? Maybe. But certainly we know that to have an effective impact on an individual, you need a lot more time. You need a lot more ability to, to come around them and to work with them.
Mm.
And that's not going to happen there.
So this is a tool on the belt.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a quick break. I'll read off today's sponsors and then we'll get back at it.
Sure.
Okay, this episode is premier sponsored by the Saskatoon Community Foundation. As said by Dr. Gabor Mate, it is impossible to understand addiction without asking what relief the addict finds or hopes to find in the drug or the addictive behavior. At the Saskatoon Community Foundation, we believe this statement is key to building a healthy, inclusive community. When we look a bit deeper, we see a common ground. From this place of humanity comes the potential to change, unite, and grow. Thank you to all those in our communities for looking deeper and carrying messages of shared resilience and hope. EHN Canada is Canada's leading provider of mental health and addiction services, providing evidence-based and medically assisted care with 1-year wraparound services for those suffering with substance use disorder. To learn more, find their link in the show notes below. Métis Nation Saskatchewan has announced its path for the pursuit of self-government. As an MNS citizen, I am proud to see my government fight for my rights. This is our moment. To learn more about the treaty and our path to self-government, go to ourmoment.ca. Pine Lodge, the treatment center I went to 7 years ago when I got sober, offers inpatient addictions treatment and aftercare programming in Regina, Saskatchewan. To inquire about services or make a donation, call 306-510-1891. Wellness News, Choice for Healthy Living, is a local resource that works to connect people to health and wellness related products, services, and expert advice from industry professionals, locally allowing us to connect and engage. Check out wellnessnews.ca or skwellnesshub.ca today to learn more. To make contact or to learn more about today's sponsors, to check out our merch, or if you want to show us some love and buy us a coffee, all of those links are also in the show notes below. Okay, we're back. So I was reading up on the new community policing policy, and in my readings, I found that it looks like violent crimes are up in Saskatoon this year by a notable amount. And in Chief Cooper's episode, and I keep referring back to Chief Cooper, but he mentioned that oftentimes where there is violence, there is alcohol.
Yes.
Is this uptick in violence happening in the peripherals of our community's substance use and poverty challenges?
Absolutely, it is. Within the realm of violent crime, absolutely, we see drugs and alcohol as a significant contributing factor to that. I had a personal experience on vacation, and elderly couple were walking down the street, enjoying themselves, enjoying the day.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody I saw walking towards them, obviously intoxicated by drug. And when they met on the sidewalk, the individual punched the old lady in the face, knocked her right to the ground.
Wow.
And of course, those are the kind of incidents that really affect community, that create fear, that affect an individual's quality of life. And so those are the things we're struggling with. Those are the things we're hearing from community.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where it comes down to that two-story concept, where that person was a person in need, probably, dealing with trauma, probably experiencing, homelessness, maybe contributing mental health issues.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to come around that person, and we need to help them, but we also need to protect the community. Mm-hmm. and understand that the outward manifestation resulted in a significant injury to somebody.
Yeah.
And so how do we balance that? How do we do what's best for both?
When talking about alcohol, when talking about the violence that can typically come along with it, and you mentioned with drugs and everything that's coming to the forefront now, that violence is around these things.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on the current regulation of alcohol?
My personal thoughts have always been on the conservative side. And we hear conversations about expanding accessibility to alcohol in public places, parks, things like that. And when I think about those things, I, of course, see it through the policing lens and through my own experiences. And I take a very cautious approach. And I believe we have, for good reason, good and tight restrictions on alcohol and the consumption in public and those types of things. And so, yeah, that's my take on it.
Do you think they're tight enough? And let me give you a lens, a look through my lens.
Yeah, for sure.
When I'm driving my children to school in the morning, we drive past the Salvation Army, and we see the people. There are community members out there, and one morning in particular, while we were driving by there, the radio was on, and my kids were listening to it, and an ad came on talking about how we should all go to the patio, and we should all have a drink, and we should all celebrate spring, and we should all, and the overarching message to me, like, I get it, right? Like, they're advertising, they're trying to sell their product, but to my kids, they're being told, like, this is how you celebrate spring.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I sure do.
So having said that, do you think that our regulations around alcohol are tight enough?
Great question. And I think it comes down to a balance. And my own personal view, and it comes again through my history, through my experiences, through policing. But we used to say, if it weren't for alcohol, we'd all be unemployed. And there is some truth to that. So much of our policing is directly tied to the consumption of drugs and alcohol. Absolutely.
and the fallout from it.
And the fallout from it.
Yeah.
And so, looking at it that way, taking a cautious approach to these types of things is, I believe, is very important. And it comes down, I think, to the family and to ensuring as parents our children know where we stand, what the risks are, what it means to glorify something that needs to be respected and looked at cautiously.
Let's move on to housing.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen an uptick in incarcerations since the onset of our housing crisis?
Wow, that's such a great question. And I would say from my experience, it's really hard to draw a line from homelessness to incarceration, but I think we can draw a line from homelessness being part of a larger equation that does lead to incarceration, because often homelessness is coupled with a social disorder, is coupled with drug addiction. It's coupled with individuals who are in significant need, who might need to steal in order to get by, who might be committing crime. And I know there would be people in the community who would hate me for saying that. But again, it's based on my experience and what I've seen. And so on the other side of the coin, there are individuals who are homeless, who are simply homeless. And some choose to live that way. We know that in the community. I've spoken to them. In the summertime, that's their preference, is to live in a tent or to sleep along the riverbank.
I'm on the river often. Me and my family, we go sea doing and stuff like that. And we've seen some little sites on the side of the river, and we're like, damn, that doesn't look too bad. I'll be real here. Like look at their view. I would love to wake up to the picturesque cityscape and every morning. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but having said that, I mean, we laugh and it's true. Some people do choose to live like that, and maybe it's a good way to live sometimes. But yeah. So what is your stance on the encampments, the homeless encampments? Are you a street sweep kind of person on this level, or what are your thoughts? What's your solutions?
When I think about where I stand, it's a progression. And so I think about the community and what I hear from the community. So, for example, we have parks, and if we take a park where kids play, where there's activities, perhaps ball diamonds, and it becomes a focal point for community, really. Yeah. It does. And if somebody sneaks into that park at 11 o'clock at night, sets up a tent, sleeps there, and by 7 o'clock in the morning, they're gone. It's clean. Often we won't even hear about that. And the community tolerates it. But when you couple that with garbage strewn around, when you couple it with now one tent turns into a community and a couple are sleeping inside, but a couple are sleeping outside, public defecation and urination, public drug use, those kind of things compound the issue, and they speak to, or they inform the community's tolerance on what they're willing to accept in their park. And so from a policing perspective, we need to look at balance. We need to look at engaging the community to see how they're feeling. Some people, simply having a person tenting in their park frightens them. Yeah. To the point where they will not utilize that park anymore. And so is that fair? And whose rights are more important, the person who's tenting or the person who would like to have their kids play on the structure in the park? And then there again, it's a balance. And so fortunately for us, the fire department takes the lead in homelessness and housing standards in Saskatoon. They they've got a really good handle on who is living rough. throughout the year.
Mm-hmm.
We know that almost every community in Saskatoon has individuals who are living rough,
Mm-hmm.
and and they do. I think they're very best to understand why they're out there, what their needs are, and they also encourage them to pack up and clean up
Mm-hmm.
and move. I'm not a street sweep kind of guy.
Yeah.
Because I understand the individuals. I speak to them. I hear their stories, and I know how difficult it is in many cases for them.
Mm.
And yet there are options, and there are ways to work through it where we can provide services and opportunities for people that will look after and ensure their well-being while it ensures community safety and ensures that people can use their parks
Mm-hmm.
and feel safe to do so.
So mentioning that the fire department takes the lead
Mm-hmm.
on this topic, do you have a lot of calls that you actually respond to when there's an encampment involved?
If there's an immediate concern for a person's well-being, like there's an encampment, but there could be overdosing, there could be
Violence.
violence, there could, they might have a fire lit, which we've already seen this year.
Mm-hmm.
That something that requires an immediate response, absolutely we will respond.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got our alternative response officers who are out there when an encampment is occurring within their area of responsibility. They play a critical role of engagement,
Mm-hmm.
also to help the fire department out, to find out who's there, are they safe, are they okay, do they need anything, but also to advise them of the law and to say, unfortunately, you're camping somewhere where it's prohibited,
Mm-hmm.
and we need to find another option for you.
You mentioned public defecation, and that brings me to the public bathrooms conversation that has really heated up in the past year, and has come to some fruition. Maybe not not all the problems are solved, but we're finding some solutions. And why is that a problem? Not only just for the outside people using the bathroom outside, but what other problems is there involved with not having enough public bathrooms?
I think the average person doesn't think about it, and they have a hard time comprehending it.
Yeah.
But if you think of it this way, if you say, I'm going to be homeless tonight.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to exist, and there's no bathroom for you.
Yeah.
For say a 12-hour period, what do you do?
Yeah.
And when you really sit and think about it, that is a big issue.
You got to break the law.
Yeah, absolutely you do.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what many individuals in Saskatoon are facing.
Mm-hmm.
We also know that the individuals who would commonly need to access those types of facilities, individuals with complex needs who are struggling, they utilize those spaces to consume drugs.
Sex work,
absolutely. They utilize them to try and dispose of used needles, which don't flush very well. We've seen in public bathroom spaces small cultures develop where there's power, there's dominance, there's coercion, there's if you want to use this bathroom, you're going to do what I tell you to do.
Wow.
And we've seen it. We know that one of the struggles when we look at public washroom facilities is who is going to manage them, who's going to clean them. And those are really difficult jobs for sure that not very many people want to do.
Yeah.
And so not only is the issue, can we provide the washroom as a facility, but can we support it effectively?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what does that look like then? Because we are getting public bathrooms, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So what's that going to look like coming off of your desk? Like what's your responsibilities there?
Well, our responsibility is to support the organization that's managing it.
Which is?
Don't know. So there will be a security need, and there will be a cleaning need for that facility. And knowing, from from working in the field for many years, we highly anticipate that there will be problems around that.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do we support and create a safe space for people in need in a respectful way?
Mm-hmm.
That's the critical question.
Yeah.
And we can't be there as a police organization. We can't be there 24/7.
There's not the budget for that.
No, and the community doesn't want to pay for professional police
Yeah.
to be manning a bathroom. They just don't.
Yeah.
And so, so we would be coming and going, and it would be part of our routine to be periodically checking and stuff like that. But it really needs full-time attention.
Mm-hmm. What a valuable resource center that could turn into.
Oh, absolutely. And there's so much possibility and potential wrapped up in a simple bathroom conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had those conversations with Colleen myself. And if we had 100 Colleens, imagine where we could get to as a city.
We'd have a lot of conferences.
But yeah, you're so right. And we know, like, when we dream a little bit and we think about the potential, it always comes with a dollar sign attached to it, which is so unfortunate, but it's just a fact of life.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do we overcome that issue of, how much a facility like that would cost?
Mm.
But, it's always a cost benefit relationship.
Yeah.
And the benefit would be huge.
It would. Yeah.
I just think moving forward, you've heard me talk about both sides of the story.
Yeah.
And you've heard me talk about balance. And when I think about taking over the chief's job from Troy Cooper, that's my focus. And I mean, part of that balance is looking after community while I look after the well-being of our staff.
Mm.
And it's hard work that we do.
Yeah.
We see and do things we should never have to do or see. And so making sure we get through it okay. Those are the things that I'll be focusing on.
Watching over the well-being of your staff.
Mm-hmm.
I've had several conversations just with friends that I see on the street, people in uniform, coming to a place where they're afraid to do their job because of the backlash, because of it might make it into the paper. Well, what if it's seen as a racial motivated arrest or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
Is that a big problem?
It is a big problem.
Yeah.
When you consider the need to arrest somebody, and there's a lawful authority to arrest them, and it's necessary in the moment. Imagine trying to do that, which is difficult all of its own,
Mm-hmm.
while somebody's videotaping you and screaming at you and calling you names and threatening to sue you and these things that we deal with, and it may not take a physical toll in the moment, but it absolutely takes a mental toll, which can accumulate to a physical toll,
Mm-hmm.
Down the road.
Mm-hmm.
And so these are things that this, policing in 2024, these are things that we have to deal with, and we have to make sure that we have those supports in place so that our members have the ability to be resilient
Mm-hmm.
and to feel like, although they're doing hard work, they're supported.
Mm-hmm.
And I would also say I have the very unique ability to travel to various events, to various organizations. And I can say that the Saskatoon Police Service is supported tremendously.
Mm.
And that's another message that I want to get to our members, is that, the vast majority of the city that they serve is supportive and loves having them out there.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what we have to hold on to, and that's what will help get us through the hard times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And with any conversation that I've had with any officers, every time I see an officer on a bike and I'm in the park with my kids, I always like, hey, how's it? Like I always make a point of like saying hello and how are you and how's things going, and just because I want to know like what the other side of the story sounds like. What does it look like out there? Why are you guys acting the way you are? Whether that be good or whether that be not so good. I mean, nobody's perfect, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely.
But I love taking every opportunity opportunity. And I've always been well greeted, and usually they got stickers for the kids and stuff. I've got my little girl trained up. Whenever she sees a cop, go ask him for a sticker, know. And like when you walked in here this morning, she gave you a big hug, and Hard Knocks is friends of SPS.
Well, thank you so much.
Yes, and thanks for joining me today. I know you're very busy, so thanks for carving out time for me. And I guess that's it.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been absolutely fantastic.
Awesome. Okay, take care.
Yeah, you as well.
Okay, if you got something out of that, please hit that like button at the bottom of the screen. If you like what you heard, leave us a comment. If you didn't like what you heard, leave us a comment. We are all about fostering productive conversations about substance use, and we want to hear your thoughts. So if you haven't yet subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. We usually publish twice a week. We've got over 300 episodes for you to catch up on. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. That's all I got. Thanks so much. Take care, everyone.
Say, this is Hard Knocks Talks.